move on. So it is fantastic to have Shane Hastie with us. Shane is often referred to as the great-grandfather or grandfather or great-great-grandfather. I can't remember. Anyway, grandfather of Agile in New Zealand, coming to us just outside of Wellington. Sorry, Shane, I know you're the grandfather of Agile. Anyway, been around the Agile and business analysis world for many years. Lots of great stuff. I've had the great pleasure of working alongside Shane in a couple of different instances and different places, and always a wealth of knowledge. And just released his new book, which I'm sure he'll tell you about, The Rock Crusher. So I will hand it over to you, Shane. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming in on a later time slot for us, and enjoy, everybody. Over to Shane.
Cool. Thank you, Craig. No mai haere, kora tātou. Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I don't know, grandfather, it'll do.
Not great.
Just means I've been getting old through this.
I thought when they said the great grandfather just meant you were awesome. So.
Thanks. All right. So yeah, as Craig mentioned, there is a new book. We've called it The Rock Crusher, a flow-based model for backlog management, or another way of possibly saying it is the backlog is dead, long live the backlog, or maybe the backlog is broken, how do we fix it? And that's the assertion that my co-authors and myself have made. So here is the rogues gallery of the guilty who put this together. Myself, Steve Adolph in Vancouver, Canada, Ryland Layton in Dallas, I think, in Texas. And we've published with the IIBA, International Institute for Business Analysis, and Jazz has been incredibly helpful. And as a publishing experience, it was really good. So if we go back 20 years, use cases were a thing. Use cases still are a thing. But there were some patterns. A whole lot of organizations were really struggling to get it right, and yet there were some who were doing it well. So Steve, along with Alistair Coburn and a couple of others, was trying to figure out what is it that those who are doing it right are doing. And they came up with a set of patterns. And that book is very much a patterns-based book. We have been inspired by, but have not done a patterns book, so to speak. But every chapter does have some very clear, what can you do, and try this type section at the end of every chapter. But we find that 20 mumble years later, with Agile has been around for a long time. The backlog is a thing that is just, everybody has a backlog. Some teams and organizations are doing it, are managing that backlog really well. A whole lot of them are not. And we again were trying to figure out what are the patterns, what are the things that those organizations who are doing it well, what are they doing? And that's what we've tried to distill in the book. And we go right the way back to one of the foundational papers, the foundational works in software engineering. Fred Brooks' 1987 article on No Silver Bullet, and we've all quoted the No Silver Bullet quote so many times, and there's no single one way that fits all. But if you haven't read this Essence and Accidents of Software Engineering article, it's everything in there still applies today. But one of the quotes that we've drawn on is this: the hardest single part of building a software system is deciding precisely what to build. And the backlog was supposed to help us do that. And if we look at the Scrum Guide in particular, and other authors, other articles, works that talk about the backlog. It's supposed to help us embrace change. It's enables us to be agile and adaptive and responsive and bring in all of the work and reprioritize. And we have this joyous environment where we have this wonderful backlog. We've got a product owner who knows everything, and the team just gets stuff done. So, and if we look at that, the value stream starts and ends with this product owner who knows everything about the product. So if you are working in what Jutta Eckstein called the Agile Cinderella project, I think this can work. If you've got the co-located, or in these days, at least within one or two time zones of each other, the collaborative cross-functional team, you're working on a reasonably straightforward technology stack, you've got direct access to real-world customers, and the environment is clear enough that one person can hold everything in their head, then it works. But I'm going to say almost none of us work in that environment today. And this is where it starts to get a bit messy. What happens before and after the product owner? So we've got DevOps now, which is supposed to help us get it right after. We've got business agility, which is supposed to help us get it right before. But it just doesn't seem to be flowing as nicely as we want it and as it could. So something comes in to the left, and particularly to the left. Organizations have mechanisms for figuring out what do they need. And in a lot of these organizations, there is a reservoir, or not even a reservoir. There is something that just, there's a mechanism that really is designed to get ideas moving through. But a lot of organizations still have this mechanism as a very, very sequential, traditional project management office controls. And we end up with the backlog as a reservoir. It's the place where ideas go to die. I'm going to say that around this screen, any of you working in product development, you've probably got backlog items that have been in the backlog for longer than a year. Has anyone, what's the oldest backlog item in your backlog? If you want to, somebody want to put things in the chat window. How old are these backlog items sitting there? See, years. One of the recent instances that I had was an organization where we went in, and part of the work we were doing was just to have a look at what is in their backlog. And there were items in the backlog that were 7 years old. Yeah, we see 3 years, 2 to 3 years. My assertion is that anything older than 3 months is never likely to get built. You might stretch that to 12 months. And John, you're absolutely right, but how many organizations clear out the whole backlog? And that's one of the things, this is one of the anti-patterns. So organizations that have a mechanism to clear out the backlog and keep it clean, keep it lean, keep it flowing, they almost don't need the rock crusher. They're doing this. But for most organizations in our experience, we see this backlog becoming a reservoir, and also we see the amalgamation of silos. So here in the IT space, in the development world, maybe we're doing really, really well. We've got our agile velocity down. Velocity is up, cycle time is down. So when an item comes into the development backlog, it gets out quickly. However, and real situation from an unnamed organization recently, cycle time in the development area was between 2 and 4 weeks for a new thing to come in that came into the backlog to get out. Cycle time to get that idea into the development team, between 4 and 8 months. So the overall cycle time, and theory of constraints tells us, you know, fix the biggest bottleneck first. The bottleneck is no longer, and for the last 20 years really hasn't been in software delivery. The bottlenecks sit in other parts of the organization. And we're not tackling those. We're not doing enough to remove those bottlenecks. And that's what we, as the authors, are asserting, that the rock crusher is a model to do this. And this is a direct quote from the book. If we're going to truly embrace lean and agile thinking, we need to change our view of backlog management from the backlog as a reservoir to a flow-based backlog. So if we think about the backlog as a reservoir, it's sitting there, things are just accumulating, and down at the bottom, they are rotting. 1, 3, 5, 7 years work. At the very least, the first thing we need to do is blast the hole out of that backlog so it becomes a pipe. So things do actually flow through. But the reality is it's going to be a bit more complicated than that. Because in any organization, you've got more ideas than what we can deliver. So you're going to have a funnel, and there's going to be an inevitable buildup at the top of the funnel, and things might even start flowing over. So in order to support that, we need a wastegate. We need a mechanism to throw things out. And if there's a single idea from the Rock Crusher book that I hope organizations, teams and organizations pick up, it is have a wastegate, throw things out of that backlog on a regular basis, and have rules for letting things come into the pipeline, and have very, very clear rules for getting them out, for throwing them out. And the other thing is, we need turbulence. It's okay that at the top of that funnel, where ideas are coming, there will be a lot of uncertainty, a lot of variability, and a lot of turbulence. We're working in a space that is about creative knowledge work. Now, this is where lean and agile get very different. In lean thinking, you don't want turbulence. You actually want to get that flow incredibly smooth and make it predictable and make it consistent every time. In the creative agile environment, you actually want to encourage the variation in the turbulence at the top, and you want to be able to throw those ideas out quickly. So have mechanisms to evaluate and to dispose of the ideas. So this is where we talk about what do we mean by the rock crusher. The metaphor of the rock crusher comes, and Steve and I came to this independently. It was quite interesting when we were sitting down and talking about our thinking on this. We both had a similar metaphor. So for me, I did quite a lot of work earlier in my career in South Africa in the diamond mines, particularly in the kimberlite fields, which are similar to the kimberlite fields in Western Australia, where it's very old volcanic pipes that go down and the diamonds are in there. So not the alluvial diamonds that you get out of the sand, but these diamonds embedded in hard rock. And what the way they mine this is they blast these huge rocks literally out of the ground and they put them through a crusher, which breaks them apart. And by working with the specific gravity of the minerals, takes out the gems and discards the rest. Well, that's the metaphor of the rock crusher. Where do we find the gems in these ideas and discard everything else? We know from things like the Standish Group survey that 68% of features are never used. Well, let's just not build them. Don't build the bad ideas. So that's where the idea of the rock crusher comes from. And for us, a rock is just a backlog item. It could be an epic, a feature, a user story, a use case, a defect, a piece of technical debt. It could be a whole initiative. You know, we'd call that a mountain range, but it's still just a bloody big rock. And we're looking to progressively break these things down. And that's the metaphor. That's the idea of the rock crusher. That ultimately we end up with a set of ready rocks that are highly valuable, the gems that are worth producing, and we've progressively discarded all of the rest. So here's the visual model of that. We do talk about different time frames. This is the concept to cash flow. Ideas come in, and they will come in at different sizes. They could be big rocks, small rocks, whatever. It might be one tiny piece of an existing initiative that drops in, is really valuable, and it will then drop all the way through very quickly. But when we need to have a mechanism at the top there to figure out what should come in, when things come in, how do we identify value? Can we crush them? Can we start to break them apart? Is there stuff we can throw out through the wastegate? And where are the gems? Then as it comes further down, we break it apart even further. Now, some of the pieces might already be very small and they're dropping through quickly. They're coming down into this ready state and going into what we call the thin pipe. The thin pipe is the current backlog for a single team. If you've got multiple teams, you might have multiple thin pipes, but effectively, that is the sprint backlog or the next few weeks' work in the Kanban flow. So that's where we're getting out there. And we've tried to be brand agnostic here. So we're not calling them with their user stories or whatever. For us, they're just a rock. And the time frames, ready, forecasted, speculative, wishful, big ideas, that you've got to figure out what is the most appropriate set of time horizons in your context, your organization. If you're in a highly volatile marketplace, you could have this over 3 months. On the other hand, if you are in a more mature organization where your products are quite stable, the wishful thinking stuff might be as far away as a year or so. I'm uncomfortable with longer time periods, but there are, we also do need to do planning in the medium to long term. And at any point along the flow, items can get thrown out into the waste. And when it goes through the wastegate, it's gone. It's not archived and maybe comes back. It's gone. Because if it comes back, If it really is important enough, it'll come back. And hopefully, if it really is important enough, they've done more work to clarify why it's important. So one of the things this gives us the opportunity to measure is what we call the crash ratio. So this is another potential metric for you. And the crash ratio is literally what is the proportion of items that are coming in that are going out through the wastegate versus going out through the thin pipe. So at the extreme end, a crash ratio of 1, everything that comes in is going out. There is no agility, there is no learning, it's just we'll take whatever order comes in and we pump it through. At the other end, a crash ratio of 0 is we're getting all of these great ideas and nothing's worth doing. Now, between those extremes is what the right spot, again, for your organization, for your environment. If you are in that highly volatile learning environment, maybe more a startup where there's a lot of experimentation happening, then you might have a crush ratio of only 30%. 70% of the ideas coming in are actually getting discarded, and we're only picking up 30% because they are the really valuable ones. We're doing the experiments, we're learning, and we're only focusing on those. On the other hand, if you are in a very stable environment, you're working on solid products that have been around for a while, your product roadmap is well understood, then it could be up 70 or 80%. We don't expect to be discarding so much because of the context and environment we're in. Measuring this and monitoring this ratio over time tells you a lot about what's actually happening. And then you can start to fine tune. Are we throwing too much away? Yeah, and then the exec that thinks their rock is nicer than the other rocks. That is where it's absolutely crucial that your wastegate policies are clear. But measuring that crash ratio, monitoring it over time, and fine-tuning it, adapting it. So yeah, Michael Porter, choosing what not to do is the essence of strategy. But any rock must be well formed. A rock has an intent. It's realized through one or other verifiable model. And we verify it by a test. At the most granular level, the ready rock that is at the level of a user story going into a team and being worked on, well, it's the tests from the TDD, from the acceptance test, from the acceptance criteria, and that's the verification. Did we deliver what we said we were going to do? And we're quite used to that. But higher up in the flow, before the rock is ready, we also need to have a verifiable model. So if we're in the speculative state, maybe 1 to 3 months away, we're not entirely sure whether we want this thing, but there are some ideas here, we're doing some workshops, we're brainstorming, and we've done maybe a paper prototype of a new feature for a product, and the verifiable model on that is the paper prototype. The test is we actually write down it's the experiment form, experiment card. How will we know that this is valid? So we're going to show this paper prototype to a representative sample of 10 people in a workshop, and their feedback will tell us whether or not this is worth doing. And if 80% of them say, yes, this is good, then we will take it through and we'll drop that one down through the pipe to the next layer, and we might crush it further, or it might be small enough. But whatever size your rock is, it must have a verifiable model. This allows us to throw things away with absolutely clear rules. So the biggest hypothesis, the biggest feature, the new initiative, the how will we know becomes that test, and we're looking to test that as early and quickly as possible. And this is where we might chunk it up. We'll slice it into smaller pieces, and you know, maybe there's a group of epics that's coming out of that, if that's the model you're using. Epic feature story. Well, you've sliced it into some epics. Which of those epics is going to be the most valuable? Which within the epics, which of the most features, which of those features are going to be the most valuable, and which ones are we throwing out? I saw a comment in the chat earlier on. People love the whole epic. No. What's the pieces of this epic that are actually going to be valuable? And having this verifiable model helps. Now, a little bit of, yeah, Ethan Petrox. Thank you. We were actually talking with the IABA today. We're possibly at a future conference going to give away Petrox again.
You and I are probably the only ones who have any idea what they actually are, right? that have got enough experience to know that.
My children had Petrox, and they did come in those boxes. But yeah, so yeah, shameless self-promotion for the other book. This way of thinking really does encourage product versus project focus. If you're going to take this flow-based model, value streams and product thinking are going to be at the core. It's possible to do that in projectized environments, but it is a lot harder. And we know that there is the strong push, you know, the project to product, the Hashno project. These ideas are not unique to rock crushing, but really important. Thanks, John. So other points that we want to make in the book, and there's a whole chapter on It Takes a Village. The product owner. We're explicitly calling out two clear roles: backlog owner and solution owner. Now, in many contexts, that's probably going to be the same person. There has to be a single individual who has the organizational authority to make priority decisions across the whole backlog, across the whole pipeline of work. But very importantly, at the ready rocks level, the ones that are coming out or going into the team, which piece of work do we do next? And that is the backlog owner. A common dysfunction that we've seen is that organizations have, one, the product owner doesn't actually own the product. They don't have this authority. I worked with one company where they, in theory, had 20 product owners working on a platform with product streams on top of that platform. And their delivery or their working cycle was very low, but their concept to cash cycle was ridiculously long. And when we did the investigation, it turned out that none of those 20 product owners had the authority to make a decision about what item should go into the backlog. There was a single individual who had all of that decision authority across 20 product streams, and that person was the chief executive. When this is where it sometimes helps to be the expensive external consultant coming in to the organization. I could go to the chief executive and say, you asked me to come in and find the what's going wrong with your product delivery. Well, please hold up the mirror. I was a little bit more diplomatic than that. But over the next 3 months, we helped that executive let go of this decision-making authority and enable those product owners to actually be product owners. But another common situation is the product owner, solution owner. And this we see often in complicated environments. So an ERP system implementation was a great example. In theory, there was a single product owner, but there were 4 business areas where the ERP system was going to impact. There was the general ledger, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and the 4th one was customer relations, call center. Each of those business areas had what was effectively a product owner. In our model, we're calling them solution owners. And there was nobody who was empowered to arbitrate between them. So the feature that got worked on next, or the piece of value that got delivered next, was an arm wrestle every couple of weeks. And it was absolutely ridiculous. And the team was never able to, because they had one implementation team, and they were never able to stay stable. So this concept of this is more than what product ownership really allows for. And we need to factor in the many different viewpoints. And one of the things that we want to call out is that we need those analysis skills as well. And a lot of our product owners and backlog owners simply don't have those skills today. But this separating backlog owner from solution owner is really, yeah, you could be one person wearing both hats in that narrow environment. But in my experience, we see rather this situation quite a lot. And the backlog owner having to be the arbiter and calling out that backlog ownership as an empowered decision-making responsibility is something that is core to the Rock Crusher model. We also want to elevate the role of the business analysis professional. Now, we published this book with the IIBA, the International Institute for Business Analysis, and all 3 of us are strong advocates for the profession of business analysis. We see somebody doing business analysis as a boundary spanner. And in the Agile extension, we spoke about the role of the BA as being the bridge, not the ferry. This is not about the traditional write the requirements document, take it down to the edge of the river, put it on a ferry, put 2 gold coins on its eyes, and push it across the river, hoping that somebody will pick it up. And maybe traditionally what happened is somebody on the other side, and an IT person picked it up, looked at it, put it on the shelf, and then built whatever the hell they felt like. No. Be the bridge. The role of the BA as the boundary spanner is to bring the right people together and facilitate the conversations. So the facilitation skill set of analysis, the questioning skill set, and the collaboration, and truly being the boundary spanner of the wide variety of stakeholders and viewpoints. This, Michael, I agree with you. It feels like this art has been lost. There's been a lot of harm done through, oh, we're agile, we don't need analysis. or we do the analysis. So I'm sorry, your typical developer really sucks at facilitating a workshop with a disparate view of stakeholders. They could be a good participant, but you need somebody with those people skills to facilitate. So, yeah, rolling wave planning built into the rock crusher. We've got these four levels: ready, forecasted, speculative, and wishful ideas. The Agile extension, we spoke about delivery, initiative, and strategy horizon. And really important is this is a feedback loop. Like, things are going up and down. So it's difficult to show in this model, but ideas are pushing back and coming around. So the turbulence in the rock crusher is really important. We learn something and it goes back in. And we sequence and adapt. And where it goes back in is somewhat needs to be clear. We need to have policies. Oh, hell, heaven forbid we have policies and processes. But one of the key things is thinking about the strategic versus tactical. So if in this thin pipe, we learn something through the customer feedback, and it's going to impact the product at this sort of level down in the ready and forecasted, well, the tactical backlog refinement, the tactical viewpoint takes over, and it just comes back in, and it'll come back in here, and it will go through. We'll give it another. We'll build in, maybe it's a new user story, and we'll give another set of acceptance criteria, and we run that through. On the other hand, we could discover something through the work that we're doing now, but here's a whole new initiative, or here is a big chunk of value that actually needs a lot of investigation. Well, then we drop it back in the top, and it would go through the more strategic refinement. Now, again, your organization might vary, but most organizations need to have a distinction between the strategic and the tactical. There is an overlap, and we refine at each level. At every level, we're constantly refining. And the refinement answers these four questions. How valuable is this rock? How big is this rock? That helps us understand, is it worth it? And then how ready is this rock tells me how quickly it should drop through. So if we've got something that's really valuable, quite small, very definitely worth it, and we understand it well, let's drop it through, and it might come in here, but within a week or within a few days, it could be at the top of the ready pipe. On the other hand, we get an idea that looks really valuable. We're uncertain about it. When we do a order of magnitude estimation for how big it is, this thing looks huge. We need to do some more refinement. Maybe we need to do some experiments. We need to break it up. It's nowhere near ready, so we'll keep it up in that speculative or wishful thinking. And these four questions, value, big, worth it, and ready, tell us, and we're doing this with every rock on a regular basis. So that verifiable model is helping us to see that, and the verifiable model will change as we break the things up. It goes, we slice up, we chunk down the rocks. The other thing that we're throwing in here is the concept of a crusher. There is work that needs to happen to understand the work to be done. In the physical rock crusher environment, in a mill, one of the round mills that break up rocks, particularly for the colored stone gemstones, they will put chunks of steel ball bearings of various densities, various hardness, in with the rocks, and they accelerate the crushing and accelerate the finding the valuable pieces. Well, that's exactly what our crushers are. A crusher is a piece of work that has a verifiable model that is about clarifying something for other work. Now, if it's a purely technical one, this is what in Scrum and in XP they would call a spike. What we deliberately didn't call it spike because we feel that the emphasis on the purely technical spike is actually a bit of a risk. There's a lot of uncertainty in the business value elements that are worth doing these types of experiments, these types of work for, but we want to make that work visible. So a crusher is still a piece of work. It's still in the backlog, and it's still going through the thin pipe. It's not separate from the flow of value. It contributes, though, to identifying the value, and the outcome of a crusher could be we've broken a rock down and it's got smaller and gone through, or it's gone out through the wastegate. Either of those is a good outcome. This can be implemented pretty easily in Kanban, where you've got the strategic and the tactical as well. Where the strategic tactical split and handoff happens, you could, if you've got a complicated environment, you might have one Kanban board and at the rock crusher and things. Then from ready downwards, you're going into multiple thin pipes. This is a fairly common model where you've got many teams working on different bits of work. We want one entry point. All work goes through the single entry point as much as possible. So we have an infographic. The IIBA very kindly did this beautiful infographic for us. I will share this with you, share this with Craig, and he can put it up for everyone. I'm also happy to let you have a copy of the slide deck. That's the model. Place commercial here. We also have a workshop where we will help you design your rock crusher, and we have the workshop is built around a canvas when you identify the hypothesis, the metrics, the value streams, the roles, the horizons, intake policies, wastegate policies, and so forth. It's a half-day workshop where we will help you get there. And the book is available now. It's on Amazon. It's in paperback. I only have 2 at the moment, but there it is. And I really love the way the IIBA, the typesetting. It's all the images are there. It's in full color. They did us proud. But there is the book. It's also available as an ebook. Michael tells me he's bought the ebook. Thank you, Michael. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, folks. Any questions at this point?
Thanks, Shane.
Yeah.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. I've kind of got a question. Look, I bought a copy of the book. I think it was the Kindle version. I think it might have been the last one though. So if you're thinking of buying it, there may not be any left, but go on and check, right? They're selling like hotcakes. I think there are 2 things I really liked. I'm about 60% of the way through, right? So I'm getting there. The last time I was like 30%. So, next time I'll probably almost be finished. 2 things I liked about it. One was like the idea of rocks, because I think the whole thing around like user stories and features and epics and all that, it just got really overcomplicated. And there was just this idea of, okay, we've got some work that we want to do, right? And then, okay, then we just need to break it down into smaller pieces, right? Until we've got something that we need to work on. And I think that kind of concept sort of got a bit lost somehow, or it's I don't know, it sort of got mutated in some way. So I really liked that it drew on that. But I think the thing that I really loved about it was the waste gate. And I don't know how many organizations I've been into, and you go into whatever tool they're using, Jira, for example, and you'll just see literally hundreds in some organizations of all sorts of things, right? You know, and it's almost like, you know, the people that have written them, they're long gone, but, you know, like they're just hoarding them. And it's just, yeah, it's just, I think it's just symptomatic of you know, what it talks about in the book, this idea that it's just place and we'll just slap everything in there and it just stays there forever. Almost like, and I think there's also like a bit of a mental drag on that, because it's almost like if you do a personal to-do list and you just like, there's things in there that maybe you're never going to get to, but you leave them on there. Well, this is me personally. There's things I'm never going to do, but I leave them on there. But it's this mental drain of like, oh gosh, I still haven't done that thing, right? And I wonder if there's a sense of that with the, you know, these huge backlogs as well. Yeah, that was it. Actually, yeah, no, I think that was it. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, the inertia of not being able to let go of an item in the backlog, and what it ends up doing is it does take our concentration. Because every time we open up that backlog and we see this list of things, people go, "Ugh." And it actually does. It has a negative impact, and it makes the work of doing the work harder.
I think when people think of the backlog, they see it as something that has zero cost, as like almost like as a free thing. And until it's kind of gone into a sprint or it's moved into that first column on the Kanban, that it's just this thing in there and there was nothing in it. Where in fact, I actually think that, you know, if you were thinking about everything in there as having a cost to even have got in there in the first place, to me, that is the kind of agile way of thinking about it, that you would like, you know, you would keep it as small as possible, right? Because you wouldn't just, oh yeah, I've got like 100 things in there, but you know, that's not wastage, right? Wastage is kind of only on this side. I did remember, sorry for talking so much, but I did remember what I was going to ask you. I just wondered that one of the things in this is that you've talked about and how like you're not actually exactly prescriptive, right? So you're not saying feature is this, story is this, task is this. And I just wonder what, and love to hear from other people. I find that so many people just want something that is absolutely prescriptive. And if you give them something, even though it's a lot better, but it's more vague, has some gray in it rather than just being black and white, that just it often doesn't land. It just that people almost want this, you know, clearly defined box to be in, or this path. But you know, maybe that's just been my path. I'd love to hear from others.
Yeah, for me, we deliberately went abstract. We didn't want to link to any particular model or approach, because we want this to be tailor it to your environment. But yeah, the language, what is the structure, what is the, you know, how big is an epic, or yeah, no, we just didn't want to go there. Yeah, I'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts on that.
One of the things that occurs to me is that Ethan, what you're talking about is that reflects levels of people's comfort and maturity in something like Agile. If they're really comfortable, hey, they're going to be playing around with it, they'll be enjoying the big picture ideas, etc. If they're just starting out, they'll want the paint by numbers. So I think it kind of reflects people's level of maturity and appreciation of the nuance. One of the things I like about the way you described it, Shane, is that you are providing this for people who do have that big picture already, but maybe got a little bit of blind spot about some of those things, particularly the stuff that's in the backlog. I had actually I had a few questions that were coming up for me while you were talking. One is, you dropped this word at some point about criteria, and there were some things later on where you're talking about, say, how big a rock is and so on. But I want to hear you talk a bit more about criteria that you use.
Well, so let me try and think back. So at one point, there's the verifiable model. So any rock needs to have a verifiable model. This is the acceptance criteria for that rock at that level of granularity in your time horizons or where it is in the pipe. If it's down right at the ready level in the thin pipe, it is the verifiable model there is probably going to be the acceptance criteria for a user story. It's that precise. Further up, where it's still in the speculative state or the wishful thinking, you still need a verifiable model, but what that verification and test will be won't be building the product, but it might be, I think the example I gave was showing a paper prototype to a focus group and getting that focus group feedback. That would be one example of a verifiable model. I can define the test. I could use the strategizer hypothesis canvas for this as well. So there's that. And then the other set of criteria is, what are your intake criteria and what is your wastegate policy? And part of the implementation workshop is defining both of those. You're muted.
Muted. What might be an example of intake criteria or wastegate criteria?
So a wastegate would be the ratio of cost to value. It could be, what is an acceptable ratio of cost to size, value to size, or value to cost. Another wastegate criteria could be, how long has this sat here before and hasn't become important enough for us to move it through. So timelines and value criteria would be those. You also can put, in some organizations, we talk about, in the book, we talk about the front door and the back door. You want to have rules for breaking the rules. We need clear criteria for bringing ideas in. So it must have an initiative canvas, and we won't even look at it unless it's got an initiative canvas and it's gone through an evaluation using some sort of a value model. And that's the front door. On the other hand, there are some people in the organization who have the authority to say, I need this. And with the backdoor policies, we're actually explicitly calling out who's allowed to do that and what do we do with this. And it's particularly important when you're down at the ready state. This is the manager who comes to their favorite programmer and says, I need you to do this for me. Ideally, we want them to say, yes, I would love to, but put it through the pipeline. But we also know that sometimes from political expediency, we need to actually allow this to happen. So we acknowledge that, and we also look at what metrics will we track on that. So every time we get something in through the back door, what's the impact on flows so that we can then start making these things visible?
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Time's kind of beating us this evening, but please join me in thanking Shane. Great session, Shane. Thank you so much for staying up late to join us this evening. Shane, if people want to, again, if they want to find the book or know more about you, where can they go?
Well, the book is probably the easiest way to get it, because I think there have been some weird things happening with Amazon. IIBA.org, if you go to the resources page on IIBA.org, there's a link, and those links are working. But there was something going on elsewhere. And me personally, well, I'm on LinkedIn, just Shane Hasty, ShaneH@softEd.com. Fairly easy to find, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shane. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We don't yet have a session for August, so if there's any budding speakers who'd like to talk, remember you don't have to you don't have to have a polished end-to-end 45-minute talk or whatever, even just short talks or any of those types of things. Read a good book and want to review it. Maybe not the Rock Crusher, Ethan, because we've had that this week, this month, and maybe and that'll be assuming you actually get to the end of it. But if anything like that, something you've been discovering at work, this is your group. So it's just as much about how we talk to each other as anything else. So welcome anybody who wants to would like to speak. Please be in contact. Or if there's a topic you'd like us to cover. John and I, rack our brains trying to think of different things to bring each month. So, and we really thank you for showing up as well. That's why we do it. So you have a session. So anyway, if you've got a topic or something you'd like to share, please reach out to us. You'll see the link in Meetup. We'd love to hear from you. All right, folks.
Lovely. Thanks, Craig, for setting it up.
Thanks, Melissa. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great evening, and hopefully we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Shane. See ya.
Good to see you, folks. Nice work, Shane.